Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's bestride.com YouTube Live. And today we're going to be talking shop. And we're actually going to be talking about, well, how you can talk to your service tech so that you can get your car fixed faster. My name is Eliana Radjo. It's my pleasure to be your moderator today. And it's also my pleasure to introduce you to the guy who's got all the answers. Bestride.com contributor Craig Fitzgerald began his automotive writing career in 1996 at autosite.com, one of the first online resources for car buyers. Over the years, he's written for the Boston Globe, Forbes magazine, and Haggerty. And for 7 years, he was the editor at Hemmings Sports and Exotic Car. Today, he's the automotive editor at Drive magazine. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Craig. We have a lot to cover, and I'm so excited you're here again. How are you?
I am great. Thanks for having me. It is great to be here.
Oh, I love having you. You always bring the fire. You always bring great topics, and today is no exception. And I'm so glad we're doing this because I have been a victim to this, so I can't be the only one. And I asked you to do this broadcast because you recently wrote a fantastic blog post for bestride.com on this very topic, and let's just call it what it is. I mean, unless you have loads of experience with car maintenance, I feel like this is something that every car owner struggles with. I mean, I know I do, and I've been in the car industry for over 14 years. And when I have to take my car in to get serviced, I mean, I always wonder if I'm getting taken to the cleaners or not. So this is perfect for us to be talking about this. I'm actually going to learn something today. So in this next half hour, it's going to be chock full of great advice from you for people who aren't car savvy,
right,
but still want to get their car fixed fast and for the right price.
Right.
And so I'm so thankful to you.
Yeah, I think everybody who goes through this really feels like they're kind of coming into this relationship with less information than the person that they're talking to. So the idea with this, this conversation is to try to get everybody a little bit on an even keel and an even platform so that we all kind of understand a little bit what everybody's jobs are and what everybody's supposed to be, bringing to the table, I guess, with these communications.
Right. I mean, that is the main part of it, is being able to communicate with your mechanic. But, you also say, hey, the shop needs to do a better job. But, us as consumers, we have to do our part, right?
Right. Exactly. And it's like, it's like going to a doctor. It really is,
Okay.
Where, you're trying to express what your issue is to somebody who's got a limited amount of time to really kind of get out, like, okay, let's both try to figure out what's going on here, what the problem is. And I think that the biggest issue is for most people is a distinct lack of communication on both sides. So we're going to try to get to somewhere where we can all have a decent amount of communication. We all get the information that we need, and we all feel comfortable when we leave a shop that you're going to get your car fixed right, that the price isn't going to be something that's going to scare you, and you get your car serviced in a pretty quick manner. So
okay, good. Okay, so look, in your article, you pointed out like 5 great tips that everyone can do so that they get a better car servicing experience. And audience, we are going to be covering all 5 of those plus more during this broadcast. But before we do, I'm just going to ask you right now, how the heck did you find your mechanic, Craig?
Well, so this is the thing, right? I do a lot of stuff myself,
right?
But there's a lot of things I don't want to do. I'm not interested in doing oil changes at this point. I'm not interested in, doing brake work at this point. There's some things I'm interested in doing, but a lot I don't want to do. So I ended up, when I moved to this town 12 years ago, I was on the same playing field as everybody else. Now I got to go find a mechanic. And I ended up going to everybody in town. And my case is a little bit specific because I have, generally older American cars. My wife has an older BMW, so I'm looking for somebody who works on older stuff. And I literally had somebody say to me, I don't work on cars older than I am. So it was like, well, okay, then I don't want you working on my car. So I'm going to go find somebody else. So it was actually really just a trial and error kind of a process for me. I ended up finding somebody who I absolutely love. My wife ended up finding somebody she absolutely loves. And, I think in our case, it was really just like visiting these shops. But for a lot of people, I mean, I'd look at your Facebook, your town's Facebook group. Usually you can get pretty decent recommendations from people there. A Yelp, I guess, Google reviews, I guess. I mean, I always sort of look at those things a little bit, like they're not exact, like they're sort of either or, right? They're either 5-star reviews or they're 1-star reviews written
Well,
by somebody who never went to the shop in the first place, right? So it's like it's hard to really gauge from those kind of review things. Your neighbors are going to be really helpful. People in your area who own the same car that you do are going to be really helpful. So I really look to the local Facebook groups as a great resource for this stuff.
yeah. And I feel also that if you have a very specific need, for instance, not everyone can work on a foreign car, for instance. Like if you own a BMW, not everyone knows how to work on a BMW, for instance, or a Mercedes. So,
Yeah,
finding somebody who specializes in those import cars might also be somebody that you need to research,
for
right?
sure. If you're an enthusiast and you're driving some sort of, high performance version of a BMW, place like the BMW Car Club of America forums, they have, local chapters, always a good resource for finding somebody who will look at a car for you and hopefully end up being your mechanic. Those sites to me are a great resource for finding at least getting you started. At least like you're not coming into this thing blind. Now like, oh, this guy's a specialist. I know a little bit about him. I know he can be a little gruff or whatever, but or it's like a one guy shop, like, and he's always busy, but
Okay,
he will
well,
get back to you,
okay, but let's talk about that because,
Yeah.
yeah, there's one guy shops in there and a lot of them are great and a lot
Yeah.
of them know what they're doing, but
Yep.
there is an argument to be made. How do you choose between a dealership versus an independent garage? You get a completely different experience with both of
Totally.
those. What's your recommendation on who should choose a dealership versus an independent garage?
Well, first of all, if you're driving a new car, you need to use the retailer. You need to use a dealership because, first of all, you may have free maintenance for a period of time. Any sort of recalls and things like that are going to happen at the dealership. There are tremendous services from retail dealerships for, picking up cars, dropping off cars, getting you rides, courtesy shuttles, all of that kind of stuff. Like you will find that at independent shops, but you're more than likely to find it at a a good sized franchised automotive dealer. They have the money to spend on stuff like that. So, I always like if you're driving something new, and there's also, by the way, there's tools that an independent shop might not have access to, especially now with software and code readers and all that kind of stuff that's like specific to cars that are, brand new. An independent shop is not going to have access to that, so you may be forced to go to a dealership, and at that point, it's like, well, which dealership do you go to? Sometimes it's the closest one, but sometimes it's the best one, and then again, you want to talk to your friends and neighbors and people who have those cars and say, look, it's 15 miles down the road, but this is a better dealership than the one that's right here in town.
Interesting, and I will also say if you do have a newer car and you go to a dealership, you're almost guaranteed to get those original equipment
Oh yeah,
manufacturer parts as well, where an
correct.
independent dealership might give you not the original
So,
manufacturer's part.
that's exactly right, and it's, it's something that we're gonna talk a little bit more about, but that's the communication part too, and that's on you as the customer. If you go into an independent shop and say, "I want OEM parts," they will put OEM parts in it, but you do have to be upfront and ask about those things. There's a reason to do it, and there's a reason not to do that, so, it's understanding what an independent shop can offer you. I will also say a dealership, you probably get better coffee there.
Oh,
You probably get a cappuccino, where at the
this
independent
is
shop you're going to get some
important.
Maxwell House. You
This
know,
is very, very important
of
information.
course,
Okay. No, really great information so far. Okay. Well, let's dive into it. Okay. So let's say we've narrowed it down to where we want to get our vehicle serviced and we're walking into the service bay. So let's get into these 5 communication tips. And I got to say, Craig, tip number one seems pretty easy. So your tip number one is understand who you're talking to. Tell
right.
us more about this, Craig.
Right. So this is the difference between a larger shop and a smaller shop. Unless you're dealing with a shop with one guy in it, you're probably not talking to the person who is going to be working on your car. You're talking to a service advisor and or a service manager, and what their responsibility is to be the conduit between you and the person who's actually working on your car. The mechanic gets paid good money. They want them working on cars all the time. They
And
don't
not
want
talking to
them
people.
they
They don't
don't
want them
want them
talking to
talking to
people.
you. They do not, right? So, and that's true even in a 3 or 4 person shop. They'll usually have somebody at the counter whose responsibility is to gather information from you and relay it to the mechanic. Now, the issue is it's a game of telephone, right? So you're telling one thing to one guy, and that guy needs to go turn around and tell it to another guy. And you know as well as I do that communications can get mixed there. So that's where it really is very important to very clearly state what is going on with your car and what your expectations are. So, you're really not talking to that person who is going to be working on the car. So if you need to explain something, you need to explain it fully.
Fair. Okay. You're making it real easy for me here today. Okay, so number 1, pretty easy, know who you're talking to. But number 2, also pretty easy. You say, use your camera on your cell phone to document the problem that you're having with your car. Now,
Yeah.
come on, seriously, Craig, is that really going to help?
It totally is, right? So, I mean, obviously, if there's steam coming out of the radiator, everybody can see that. But if you're driving and there's a noise in the car that
Mhm.
you can, safely record with your video camera or the voice recorder, absolutely do that. Like, don't feel ridiculous doing that because, if your car is making a whoa, 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 whoa noise, you've either got to replicate that yourself or you can take a video of it and show your service advisor, here's exactly what my car is doing. Here's what happens when I speed up. Here's what happens when I slow down. I'll give you a good example. My daughter has a 2003 Jeep Wrangler.
Right.
She sent me a video one night and she was like, "What's going on with my headlights?" And she was on her way home. Her friend took the video. She was a passenger in the car and the headlights were flickering. So it was like she had said that to me in the text, but then sent me the video. And it was like, oh, okay, well, like I've got to address this immediately. And it was easy enough for me to figure out what was going on just by that video rather than having her say, well, this happens at this time. It doesn't happen at this time. It's intermittent. I could see exactly what was going on. And we really quickly were able to fix the problem. So it worked out really well for us. And I do it all the time. I end up doing it all the time. Like, if something has, if usually if it's obvious, you don't need to do that. But if it's some weird intermittent problem, your lights flickering or something like that, that's a good opportunity to really utilize the camera that everybody has with them now.
All right. All right. This totally makes sense. I get it. All right. So 1 and 2, super easy. All right. But
Correct.
this
All
next
right.
one, this is for
This is
all
a
the
challenge.
marbles. Yeah, yeah. This is the biggest bone of contention, I think. This is the reason why people hate going to the mechanic. Estimates.
Oh yeah.
And you say that estimates are just that. They're not meant to be a
Right.
final price quote. But
Right.
come on. I mean, if we're expecting to pay 400,
Right.
gosh, I
So
hate it
here's
when it turns out to be 800. But, what can we do to improve that communication during, this part of the process? Because this is the part where people hate.
right, right. And this is difficult for everybody. It's difficult for the shop too because they're saying to you, all right, on a cursory examination of this vehicle, it looks like you need front brake pads. That is going to be the cost of the brake pads plus the labor plus any materials we use, brake cleaner and all that kind of stuff, right? So say the estimate is $400, right, for that. And then they get in there and they realize, you know what, your
Rotors.
rotors
Oh, I
your
knew you were
rotors
going
need
to
to get
say it.
replaced. There's a bunch of other
The
stuff, and now all of a
calipers.
sudden,
Oh, yeah.
right, now all of a sudden you're into much more expensive territory.
Yeah.
Now it's on the mechanic side, they've got to be clear about that up front, right? So they need to do a better job to explain to you, hey, look, if we get into this and we find, we're going to measure the rotors, and if the rotors are not within spec, we're going to recommend that you have them replaced. It's totally fine to do that. But what happens is people get that initial estimate figure in mind, and then all of a sudden they show up at the shop and the estimate's 1,200 and the bill is $1,200. So I think what people need to do is be very clear and very upfront about, look, I get the estimate and I get that it may or may not be more expensive than the estimate. But if it's going to be 10% more or 15% more, I need a phone call. And, really, most shops are get much better at this now. There's all kinds of things that they use. There's tools that they can use that will actually text you from the mechanic's phone a picture of what's going on, and then you can either give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and they will either do it or not do it. You'll get an adjusted estimate. So technology has helped a lot. Mechanics, just like everybody else, hate making phone calls. So but I expect a phone call if something is going to be more, significantly more. So you got to set that expectation with the service advisor up front. Like, I get it. This is an estimate, $400 here. If it's more than that, you got to call me. And I think that really kind of helps, alleviate some of that issue. And then it's up to you. It's like, well, then it's up to you if you want to get a second opinion, if you want to, go and actually go through with it or just not do it at all. I mean, it's all, you're not forced to do any of this stuff. So like, even if you brought your car in for brake work and they looked at the pads and they took the wheels off and looked at the rotors, they're just going to put the wheels back on and you can go home. You don't have to get the service done at that point. But really kind of if you're getting a phone call from somebody that says you need rotors, that has to come with an additional cost, right?
I have gotten that phone call.
Right. It's never pleasant. It's not the
No.
shop's fault. It's not the shop's
No.
fault. And there's other
No.
things like, I will say too, there's other jobs. We've talked about timing belts before, right?
Mhm.
You go in for a timing belt, you got to do it every 75,000 miles. There's all kinds of things associated with that timing belt that also need to be replaced on that same schedule. Otherwise, it's a waste of money to do the timing belt. So you need a water pump. You need an idler pulley. You need a serpentine belt that runs all your accessories. Like, all of those things cost money. They add to the job as a whole. So, all of a sudden, a belt that costs, like, the literal cost of a timing belt is like $150 turns into a $1,400 job because you're doing all of this other stuff, because all of this other stuff is kind of worn out at the same rate. So it's something to consider when you have to go in for things like that.
Wow. Okay. This is great, great advice. Let me ask you something. Is there certain things that should be on the estimate or that we should look for on the estimate, or uh, certain questions maybe that we should ask other than, okay, I know you're replacing my brakes, but could it go deeper than that?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect to see on an estimate, something about what the parts are going to cost, something about what the labor is going to cost, something about what the materials are going to cost,
And how
and
long
then
it would take to get your car back?
exactly, exactly. So yeah, that's another thing that people tend to get excited about is like, oh, I dropped the car off and then I didn't get it back the same day. Like, look, if it's in there for an oil change, you should be in and out in 2 hours minimum, right? But if it gets into bigger stuff, parts availability right now is not great. I know a lot of things are just not available at the moment, or they're taking longer to get. So if a shop says, "Hey, we need another day to do this," it's not going to cost you more money to do that.
Mhm.
To have it in the shop for an extra day, it's more inconvenience for you. But if they've given you a car to drive around, that's okay. If you don't have an issue getting around otherwise, that's okay. I'm okay with most of that. What I don't like is not hearing from people. Like, I drop a car off and 4 o'clock comes around. I'm expecting to pick it up, but I haven't gotten a phone call from anybody or a text or whatever saying my car's ready. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, at 5 o'clock, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to need it for another day. And now I've got to kind of plan for all of that stuff. Like, I'm looking for better communication from the shop about when I'm going to get that car back. That definitely is helpful.
That is helpful. All right, this is all fantastic advice. We're moving on to tip number 4, and, um, you know, uh, this again, great advice. You say, just do some basic research on what the problem might be
Yeah.
before you see the mechanic. Now, I'll tell you, audience, I am no different from the rest of you. I too get the dreaded check engine light, just like everyone else on occasion. But come on, Craig, that could be like 100 different things wrong with your car.
Hundreds.
What kind of basic research are we talking about here?
So the check engine light is the like kind of universal,
It's like the
like,
blue screen of death on your laptop.
no,
Like,
like, right, right. So there's two things. First of all, like, there's not a big deal check engine light, and there's a big deal check engine light.
really, because they
First of
look
all,
the
yeah,
same on the dashboard.
right. So it's the same light, but if it's solid, if it's not blinking, you don't worry about it. Like, get it addressed, but you can drive the car while that light is on. If it's flashing, you got to get that thing fixed immediately. It whatever the problem is, it's what the system is doing is it's telling you, if you don't get this fixed right away, you're going to have other problems real shortly. So, like, you may have a fuel injector that's not firing properly, and then that can cause your catalytic converter to burn out, which is going to be thousands of dollars versus the 200 to replace a fuel injector and do whatever else they need to do. So that's number one. Number two, any auto parts store, any decent auto parts store will come out and read the codes for you and tell you exactly what the code is. So they have a code reader that plugs into the car. It'll come up and say it's
Ooh.
P0456. You write that down. Those guys will probably tell you what it is, what that code is. But if they don't, you can search that code on Google and find out exactly what that code is. And then that gives you, it's not like you're going to fix it yourself, but you're going to walk into the service bay knowing exactly what the problem is, and you're going to have the same information that the service advisor does. So you say, I've got a P0456 code. I looked it up. That says whatever it is. I don't know if it's an O2 sensor, let's say. And then he goes, okay, like, I'm going to relay that to the mechanics. You may need two O2 sensors. That may be the problem. You may have a loose gas cap, like, those are the kind of things that like give them the information that they need. You now feel like you've got some information so that you are at least coming to this conversation with, you have some basis to kind of, you're not going in blind, basically. You're giving yourself a lot better information. And then if you want to go a step further than that, you can go to YouTube and start doing some research there. And it's a little bit like WebMD, where like
Okay, that's good
everything is
enough.
cancer, but it's still like it's a good thing to do. You can look at that and go, oh, 4, 5, 6, like that's not a big deal. Like that should be relatively easy to fix. And for some people, maybe it's something you fix yourself, but most people are going to go to the shop, but at least you're armed with that information to help you understand what's going on with the car and how to explain that.
I feel like if you go to your mechanic and you're like, "Hey, so I had this checked out. It's PO 456." He's gonna be like, "All right, I see you. All
Yeah.
right."
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I would love that.
Okay, we have one last tip to close this out, and I gotta say, Craig, I honestly can say I have never done this myself, and I am appalled at myself that I haven't. But tell everyone what you're recommending finally.
I tip my mechanics,
What?
and I don't do it every time. I don't do it every time I'm in the shop, but at Christmas time, I show up with Dunkin' Donuts gift cards for everybody in the shop, and I may show up with a box of donuts. I have shown up with beer if I know that the people like beer. It's I know it's like, oh, you're getting your car serviced. These guys are getting paid good money. It's an expensive deal. Why would I tip these people? I tip everybody. I tip, the guy who trims my beard. I tip my trash guy. I tip the mailman. Like, why would I not tip these guys? And I'll tell you what it does. It's not going to get you, it's not going to get you a discount. It's not going to get you, any special treatment in there other than they will remember that you did that. And on a Friday, if you've got a flat, they will fix that for you. They will get you in line to get your car serviced faster. Yeah, it works every time. It has worked flawlessly for me. And I think it really helps form a relationship with whoever you're talking to at the shop. I think it's an important thing to do.
Because your mechanic you've had now for how long? Like this
12
is
years.
what?
12 years. I haven't gone. The only thing I've gone to, the only thing I have gone to somebody else for is a transmission rebuild, which is a very specific thing. It's a very specific skill. And I have a friend who's really good at it. So like I have a lot of guys. I have a transmission guy. So I go to him for that. But everything else has been 12 years with BDR Automotive in Holliston. They're great.
I assume I guess I should ask and not assume. You haven't had the same car for 12 years, have you?
No, but I have had various American half falling apart. I had a 78 Blazer. I had a 96 Buick Roadmaster wagon. I now have a 66 Jeep CJ5. So
Nice.
yes, it is old stuff that requires almost constant attention, and they're happy to do it for me.
That is fantastic.
I
Craig,
love these guys. They're great.
once again, you have brought us the automotive fire here at bestride.com on our YouTube live. Thank you so much. Great conversation.
I'm happy to do it. And I'm happy to know that, I hope that you will have a better experience the next time you go in a shop.
Excellent. Me too. Here's. Thank you so much for joining us. It's not the last time you're going to be on a Best Ride YouTube Live. I know that, Craig Fitzgerald. As a matter of fact, audience, you can catch up with Craig right here on bestride.com. His newest blog just came out. I told you about it. We just talked about it. But hey, Craig, what you writing about next?
We're doing a beginner's guide to off-roading for the
Ooh.
next thing that we're working on. So that should be fun.
So it's like off-roading 101. Is
It is.
it a 101
Yeah,
kind of thing? I can't wait to read it. It'll be out next month.
for sure. Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. bestride.com is your one-stop shop for smartest, easiest way to find a car online. On our website, you can find numerous vehicles to consider, helping you narrow it down to the one that's right for you. You can search by body style, make, model, you name it. Zip code. Connect with local car dealers, read car reviews, industry news, other auto-related news, and great videos like this one that we just did. So stop by bestride.com, search anything it's a great time to buy a car. All right. Bestride.com, we can help. Search millions of cars, find your best ride. So if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions regarding our broadcast and our topics, feel free to contact me directly. I'd love to hear from you. My name is Eliana Raggio. You can reach me directly by emailing me at eliana@bestride.com. On behalf of Craig Fitzgerald and the rest of the amazing crew over at bestride.com, thank you all so very much for spending this time with us today. And I hope to see you all on another broadcast from us, your friends at bestride.com. Take care, everyone. Time to wave, Craig.
Thanks again.